You stand before a city that no longer exists, yet refuses to die. Its stones are gone, its palaces silent, its emperors reduced to names on crumbling parchment. And still, when you close your eyes, Constantinople rises again. A fortress of gold and marble. A crossroads of worlds. A promise of endurance. For more than 11 centuries, the Byzantine Empire shaped the destiny of continents, fought off rising powers, preserved ancient knowledge, and stood as the last radiant flame of Rome. This is the story of 1,000 years of triumph and tragedy, of emperors and heretics, of armies in glittering armor, and of a civilization that refused to surrender its identity. This is the complete history of Byzantium. It begins in a world on the edge of collapse. The year is 330 CE. You stand with Constantine the Great, a man whose ambitions stretch farther than any wall or frontier. Rome, the eternal city, groans beneath the weight of civil war, economic turmoil, and a fractured empire. Constantine looks to the east, to a small Greek city perched on a peninsula between the Golden Horn and the Sea of Marmara, Byzantium. A place with a deep natural harbor, defensible hills, and access to the crossroads of Europe and Asia. He envisions not a city, but a rebirth, a second Rome, a Christian empire rising above ancient pagan foundations. And so the transformation begins. Streets widen, forums rise. A colossal palace unfurls across the shoreline. Churches glitter beneath the Mediterranean sun. When the work is done, Constantinople emerges, not merely a capital, but a declaration of survival. But as Roman banners fly above its walls, the world outside is shifting. Barbarian kingdoms rise in the west. Old frontiers crumble. Trade routes warp under pressure. While Rome buckles, Constantinople stands unwavering. Its walls, triple-layered fortifications stretching nearly 7 kilometers across the landward approach, become the envy and terror of the medieval world. The Theodosian walls, completed in the early 5th century, will withstand over a millennium of assaults, outliving the empire they were built to protect. Yet behind those walls, life pulses with cultural brilliance. Greek becomes the language of the court. Christian theology fuels heated debates. A new identity emerges, not Roman, not entirely Greek, but unmistakably Byzantine. Though emperors still call themselves Basilius Roman, Emperor of the Romans, they are ruling an empire transformed. And then, in 476, the unimaginable happens. The Western Roman Empire collapses. The Gothic king Odoacer deposes the last Western emperor. Rome falls, but not Rome entire. In the east, the empire endures, wounded, pressured, but alive. Constantinople becomes the final guardian of Roman law, Roman diplomacy, Roman engineering, and Roman statecraft. It will carry the Roman world forward into a new age. The 6th century dawns with a ruler of colossal ambition, Justinian I. Under his reign, the empire unfurls its wings for one last great attempt to reunite the Mediterranean world. You watch fleets depart from Constantinople, carrying legions commanded by the brilliant General Belisarius. You follow them as they strike at Vandals in North Africa, reclaiming Carthage in a matter of months. You witness the grinding struggle against the Ostrogoths in Italy, a war that devastates the peninsula but succeeds in returning Rome to imperial hands. For a brief, shimmering moment, Justinian restores the empire's ancient glory. Yet victories come at a price. The treasury strains. A devastating plague arrives in 541, cutting down millions. The dream of restoration, though radiant, proves fragile. Still, Justinian's legacy extends far beyond conquest. In the heart of Constantinople, he orders the construction of a cathedral unlike anything the world has ever seen, Hagia Sophia. Its massive dome seems to float on air, crowned with gold mosaics that capture divine light. When Justinian steps inside for the first time, legend says he whispers, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." And in that moment, Byzantium reveals the power of its vision, to shape the sacred, to reshape the world. As centuries pass, storms gather at the edges of the empire. To the east, the Sasanian Persians rise once more, locked in a deadly struggle for supremacy. Armies clash from Armenia to Egypt. Cities fall and are retaken. The two superpowers bleed each other dry, unaware that a new force is about to burst onto the world stage. In Arabia, tribes unite under the banner of Islam. Within a generation, Muslim armies sweep across the Middle East. Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, ancient heartlands of the Roman world, fall swiftly. Byzantium reels, shrinking into a shadow of its former borders. But Constantinople stands firm. In 717, an Arab fleet surrounds the city, determined to finally extinguish Rome's last flame. And you witness one of history's most dramatic defenses. From the walls, Byzantine ships launch a terrifying weapon, Greek fire, a liquid inferno that clings to water and devours wood and flesh alike. The besieging navy burns. The army starves. Winter crushes the survivors. Byzantium endures, proving once again that the empire's strength is not merely geographic, but spiritual, an unbreakable will. As the empire stabilizes, something remarkable happens. A cultural renaissance begins. The Macedonian dynasty rises in the 9th century, ushering in centuries of prosperity. Scholars flock to imperial libraries. Ancient Greek texts, long forgotten in the West, are copied and preserved. Art flourishes in brilliant mosaics. Diplomacy becomes a Byzantine specialty, intricate, subtle, filled with rituals and secrets that foreign envoys struggle to decipher. And far to the north, the emerging Slavic world looks to Constantinople for faith and culture. Missionaries Cyril and Methodius carry Christianity and the Slavic alphabet to the kingdoms beyond the Danube. Through them, Byzantine culture flows into the veins of Eastern Europe, shaping the future of Russia, Ukraine, and the Balkans. But fate has other plans. A new power rises in Anatolia, the Seljuk Turks. In 1071, on the plain of Manzikert, the Byzantine army suffers a catastrophic defeat. Emperor Romanos IV is captured. Anatolia, the empire's heartland, its recruiting ground, its economic base, begins to slip away. Panic fills Constantinople. Provinces rebel. Generals seize the throne. The empire teeters on the brink of annihilation. Desperate for help, Byzantium turns to the west. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos sends envoys to the Pope, requesting mercenaries. But what arrives is far beyond what he expected. Waves of crusaders surge across Europe, driven by piety, ambition, and dreams of plunder. Their arrival reshapes not only the map of the Middle East, but the empire itself. Although Alexios skillfully uses the First Crusade to recover lost territory, tensions simmer. The Western and Eastern Christians, divided for centuries, find themselves trapped between cooperation and betrayal. Those tensions reach their tragic climax in 1204. The Fourth Crusade, diverted by politics, greed, and Venetian manipulation, turns its fury upon Constantinople itself. You watch in horror as the greatest city in Christendom is looted for 3 days. Monasteries are pillaged. Icons are shattered. Priceless treasures vanish into European cathedrals and private collections. The empire is torn apart, divided into Latin and Greek successor states. Though the Byzantines reclaim Constantinople in 1261, the damage is irreparable. The empire that rises from the ashes is weary, underpopulated, and surrounded by hungry enemies. To the east, a new threat grows, the Ottomans. They absorb rival Turkish beyliks, seize Byzantine cities one by one, and build a state founded on military discipline and administrative brilliance. By the 15th century, the empire is reduced to a handful of territories and a capital whose once mighty walls are cracked and thinly manned. And so we arrive at the final act. The year is 1453. Mehmed II, only 21 years old, leads an army of over 80,000 against a city defended by barely 7,000. You stand on the ramparts with Emperor Constantine XI, a ruler who knows he cannot win, yet refuses to abandon his people. Cannons roar. Towers crumble. Waves of soldiers crash against the walls. After 53 days, the Ottomans breach the defenses. Constantinople falls. Constantine XI disappears into legend, the last Roman emperor, dying with sword in hand. Yet the story does not end in defeat. Byzantine scholars flee westward, carrying Greek manuscripts that ignite the Renaissance. Orthodox Christianity endures through the Patriarchate. The empire's legal traditions echo through European courts. Its art shapes centuries of religious expression. And the memory of Constantinople, the lighthouse of the medieval world, continues to shine across time. As the smoke of Constantinople's fall drifts across the Bosporus, you begin to understand a truth that echoes through every century of Byzantine history. Empires die, but civilizations endure. And so part 2 of this story does not begin with an ending. It begins with what survives. The memory of Byzantium, carried by refugees, scholars, priests, and diplomats, spreads across the world like embers carried by the wind. Each ember lands somewhere new, igniting transformations far beyond the empire's former borders. Across the Adriatic, in the bustling cities of Italy, a quiet revolution is already stirring. Scholars in Florence, Venice, and Rome hunger for ancient wisdom, and when learned Byzantines arrive with armfuls of manuscripts, the West opens its doors. You watch as exiled intellectuals like Belisarius, Crusades, and Plethin bring the works of Plato, Euclid, Homer, and Galen into Renaissance libraries. These were texts forgotten or unknown in medieval Europe, but preserved for centuries in Constantinople's monasteries and imperial scriptoria. Now, in the aftermath of disaster, they become seeds of rebirth. Artists study Byzantine mosaics to understand the secrets of gold leaf and divine proportion. Philosophers rediscover the metaphysics of antiquity. And across Europe, a movement erupts, humanism, built in no small part on the heritage carried out of a dying empire. The light of Byzantium, once confined behind the Theodosian walls, spreads across an entire continent. But to truly understand the Byzantine legacy, you must step back into the centuries before the fall, into the rhythms of a civilization that evolved far beyond its Roman origins. As early as the 7th century, Byzantium forged something new, a world of intricate court ceremony, shimmering religious art, and a state whose identity fused Roman law with Greek culture and Christian spirituality. Its bureaucracy grew into one of the most sophisticated on earth. The emperor, the Basilius, was not merely a ruler, but God's chosen representative on earth, surrounded by rituals meant to project cosmic authority. In the Great Palace, you see mechanical lions roar and golden birds sing, impressing foreign envoys who leave the court convinced they've seen paradise itself. And outside the palace, in the streets of Constantinople, life unfolds in layers of color and sound. Markets overflow with silks from China, spices from India, furs from Russia, jewelry from Armenia, glass from Syria. The hippodrome, the heart of urban life, erupts in roaring crowds, political chants, and factional loyalties so fierce that they once plunged the empire into the deadly Nika riots. Here, Byzantine society shows its contradictions, deeply religious yet politically passionate, disciplined yet unpredictable, cultured yet capable of explosive violence. Religion, too, becomes a battleground. In the 8th and 9th centuries, the empire is torn by the iconoclast controversy, a fierce struggle over the use of holy images. You watch monasteries burn, icons smashed, and emperors clash with patriarchs. At stake is not just theology, but identity itself. When icon veneration finally triumphs, the empire redefines its artistic soul. Mosaics bloom once more in gold and sapphire. The Virgin Mary, Christ Pantocrator, saints and angels shimmering across domes and apses. In Hagia Sophia, light filters through windows so skillfully placed that the structure seems alive, pulsing with a celestial radiance. And Byzantium's influence radiates far beyond its borders. In 988, Prince Vladimir of Kiev sends envoys to study the religions of neighboring civilizations. When they enter Hagia Sophia, they are overwhelmed by beauty so profound that they cannot tell if they stand in heaven or on earth. Their report helps convince Vladimir to convert to Eastern Christianity, and through him, the cultural DNA of Byzantium flows into the emerging Russian world. Over the centuries, Moscow's rulers declare themselves successors to Constantinople, the Third Rome. Even as the empire shrinks, its spiritual and cultural legacy grows. But Byzantium's story is not only one of culture and diplomacy, it is also a relentless struggle for survival. After the chaos of the iconoclast era, the empire reclaims its strength. Under the Macedonian dynasty, armies led by generals like Nikephoros Phokas and John Tsimisks pushed back the caliphates, reconquering Syria and Crete. The empire's economy flourishes. Provincial themes supply loyal troops. Cities burst with new prosperity, and scholars debate the nature of the cosmos in imperial academies. Yet beneath the surface, cracks deepen. The Anatolian aristocracy accumulates power, undermining the old balance between emperor, army, and peasant soldiers. The wealth of great families strains the theme system. Central authority wavers. And then, at Manzikert in 1071, everything changes. The defeat at the hands of the Seljuk Turks opens the floodgates. Within years, most of Anatolia, the empire's agricultural heart, is lost. Entire populations flee westward, and the treasury weakens. Byzantium enters an age of desperation. Still, the empire refuses to die. The Comnenian emperors claw their way back from the brink, using diplomacy, marriages, and brilliant military reforms to restore strength. Alexios I manipulates the First Crusade with masterful skill. John II expands the empire's borders. Manuel I dazzles Europe with imperial magnificence. But after Manuel's sudden death, instability returns. The empire fractures into factions. Foreign enemies circle like wolves. And then comes the catastrophe of 1204. The sack of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade shatters the empire's wealth, population, and prestige. What rises afterward is a weakened state, brimming with courage but drained of resources. Yet, even so, Byzantium endures for nearly 2 more centuries, a testament to its unmatched resilience. As we return to the era after 1453, we find that the Byzantines, though dispossessed, are not forgotten. Their traditions live on in Orthodox monasteries, in Slavic kingdoms, in Renaissance ateliers, and in the Ottoman courts that repurpose Byzantine laws and architecture. The empire's administrative genius, artistic brilliance, and theological profundity persist in forms both visible and subtle. And as historians begin to study the medieval world more deeply, Byzantium reemerges not as a relic, but as a civilization of astonishing sophistication, a bridge between ancient and modern worlds. Yet the most remarkable legacy of Byzantium may be the simplest, its endurance. For 1,100 years, the empire stood at the crossroads of continents, religions, and empires, surviving invasions, plagues, civil wars, and countless turning points that would have destroyed any lesser state. It carried the torch of Roman civilization forward, preserved ancient wisdom, shaped the course of Christianity, influenced entire cultures, and left behind a story that still resonates today. A story of resilience, brilliance, contradiction, and unbreakable spirit. You return now to the very beginning, to a world where the foundations of Byzantium were not yet laid. Because to understand the full arc of its 1,100-year saga, you must see how the Roman Empire itself forged the path that Byzantium would inherit, reshape, and eventually pass on to the world. Long before Constantine chose his shining city on the Bosporus, the eastern provinces of Rome, rich, urbanized, ancient, were already the empire's beating heart. Egypt's grain fed the Mediterranean. Syria buzzed with merchants and scholars. Anatolia supplied soldiers and gold. Even as the Western Empire slid into crisis, the East stood firm, wealthy, and deeply rooted in Greek culture. Byzantium did not suddenly emerge from Rome's ashes. It was Rome's eastern strength crystallizing into a new form. You can almost hear the echoes of the early centuries. Roman governors sit in marble halls in Antioch, Alexandria, and Ephesus. Cities glow with temples, theaters, and aqueducts. Greek philosophy flows through Roman law, merging 2 intellectual worlds into one. When Christianity begins spreading from Jerusalem outward, it moves first through the eastern provinces, taking root in cities where ideas mix freely. By the time Constantine calls for the Council of Nicaea in 325, the East is already home to theological scholars, bishops, and church communities that will shape Christianity for the next 2 millennia. This deep cultural foundation explains something essential: why the Eastern Roman Empire endured while the West collapsed. When waves of migrations and invasions struck the western provinces, Goths, Vandals, Franks, Lombards, the East absorbed the shock more effectively. It had fortified borders. It had older cities. It had richer trade networks. And most importantly, it had Constantinople, a city designed not just to rule, but to last. As you move through the early Byzantine centuries, you begin to see how the empire built mechanisms of survival unmatched by any power of its age. Bureaucratic offices developed with exacting precision. Tax systems were reformed to protect small farmers from predatory elites. Provincial themes organized soldiers who could defend their own homelands. Emperors were not merely monarchs. They were administrators, theologians, reformers, and sometimes military commanders leading from the front. In the 7th and 8th centuries, during the great crises that nearly shattered the empire, these systems allowed Byzantium to adapt. When the Arab conquest stripped away the wealthy provinces of the east and south, the empire transformed itself almost overnight. Old Roman models of heavy taxation were abandoned for leaner, more flexible systems. Cities shrank but tightened their defenses. Greek replaced Latin as the official language, marking a cultural shift the empire had long known but never formally embraced. What might have destroyed any other civilization instead forced Byzantium to evolve, a pattern repeated again and again across its 1,100 years. And then, emerging from the crucible of hardship, comes one of the most astonishing developments of the medieval world: the flowering of Byzantine art. Stand before a shimmering mosaic in the Church of the Holy Apostles or the monastery of Hosios Lucas. Look closely at the gold glass tesserae, each piece angled slightly to catch the light. These are not mere decorations. They are windows into a metaphysical universe. Byzantine artists sought to portray the divine not as an earthly presence, but as a timeless, radiant reality. Figures float without shadows. Faces glow with solemn serenity. Christ is not depicted as a man from Galilee, but as the eternal Logos, a presence before which emperors bow. This artistic vision radiates far beyond the empire. You see it in the domes of Russia, in the churches of Serbia, in the frescoes of Bulgaria, in the icons that believers venerate from the Mediterranean to the Arctic. Every stroke of paint, every curve of the dome, every glowing mosaic carries the legacy of Constantinople's spiritual imagination. But Byzantium was not only a cultural beacon, it was also a master strategist. Its diplomacy becomes one of its greatest weapons. With neighbors on every frontier, Slavs, Arabs, Persians, Bulgars, Pechenegs, Turks, the empire perfects the art of surviving between competing powers. Ambassadors travel with chests of gold, silks, and intricately crafted gifts. Treaties are woven from marriages, trade privileges, and promises whispered in palace corridors. Foreign rulers marvel at the empire's ability to turn enemies into allies, rivals into clients, and distant kingdoms into partners through nothing more than persuasion and spectacle. And yet, the empire's story is never free from tension. The relationship between emperor and church, though mutually reinforcing, is constantly shifting. Some emperors attempt to impose theological doctrine, sparking resistance from monastic communities. Others clash with patriarchs over religious policies or imperial authority. These struggles, the battles over icons, the debates over Christ's nature, the councils that attempt to reconcile East and West, shape a religious tradition that is both deeply intellectual and profoundly mystical. As you step back and watch the centuries pass, you begin to see Byzantium not as a static relic, but as a civilization in constant motion. Its borders expand and contract like breathing. Its culture absorbs influences from Persia, Arabia, the Caucasus, and the steppe. Its language evolves. Its coins change. Its armies shift from armored cataphracts to lightly equipped frontier soldiers. Every generation rebuilds the empire in its own way, responding to new pressures with creativity and endurance. This dynamism is what prepares the empire for its grand revival under the Macedonian dynasty, a golden age of military victories, cultural brilliance, and religious influence that will shape the medieval world. It is a time when Byzantine emperors reclaim lands lost centuries earlier, when scholars reorganize ancient legal codes, when trade routes flourish from Constantinople to the Black Sea, the Balkans, and beyond. But golden ages do not last forever. As the 11th century dawns, the empire's delicate equilibrium begins to falter. Rival aristocratic families grow too powerful. Imperial authority weakens. And on the far eastern frontier, a new people, the Seljuk Turks, enter the stage. Their arrival will reshape the destiny of Byzantium forever, setting the stage for the catastrophe at Manzikert and the empire's long struggle to reclaim its lost heartlands. Before that storm breaks, though, the empire will stand once more at the height of its influence. A dazzling, cosmopolitan world where merchants crowd the harbors, scholars debate in palace chambers, soldiers march beneath banners of gold and purple, and emperors hold court in halls where the ancient and the divine seem to meet. This is where our story now turns, to the age of revival, glory, and looming danger, an age that will reveal both Byzantium's brilliance and the shadows gathering beyond the horizon. You stand now in an empire reborn, an empire rising out of the chaos of earlier centuries with a confidence so bright it seems almost defiant. The dawn of the Macedonian dynasty in the 9th century marks not simply a political shift, but a true renaissance in the Byzantine world. After the turbulence of iconoclasm and the bitter losses of earlier eras, the empire finds its footing again. Its borders strengthen. Its culture blossoms. Its cities hum with wealth and possibility. For the first time in generations, the people of Constantinople can exhale and dream again. You walk through the capital at the height of this revival. The harbors along the Golden Horn overflow with ships from every corner of the Mediterranean. The traders shout in Greek, Armenian, Arabic, Latin, and Slavic tongues. Caravans bring silk from China, illuminating manuscripts from Syria, and shimmering glassware from Egypt. Craftsmen in the city's workshops transform raw materials into works of art coveted across continents. You feel the pulse of a global metropolis, a place where the ancient world's knowledge and the medieval world's dynamism intersect in dazzling harmony. In the palace complex, a new intellectual brilliance takes shape. Emperors like Basil I and his successors surround themselves with scholars, theologians, jurists, and historians. They commissioned the rewriting and organizing of Roman law, resulting in the Basilica, a monumental legal code in Greek that updates centuries of jurisprudence. In libraries and scriptoria, monks copy ancient manuscripts with a devotion that preserves works of science, philosophy, and literature that would have otherwise vanished from history. Without Byzantium's meticulous scribes, countless texts of the classical world, Aristotle, Sophocles, Euclid, might have been lost forever. Meanwhile, the empire's armies regained their strength. Under generals like Nikephoros Phokas, John Tsimisks, and Basil II, Byzantine soldiers reclaim lost territories with relentless resolve. You ride with the cataphracts, heavily armored cavalry whose thunderous charge can shatter enemy formations. You march alongside infantry who blend Roman discipline with new tactics forged during centuries of frontier warfare. As campaigns push eastward, the empire retakes Crete from Arab pirates, secures Cyprus, and advances deep into Syria. The military revival is not mere bluster, it is transformation. The empire becomes once again a powerhouse capable of reshaping the political map of the Near East. And then comes the reign of Basil II, the Bulgar Slayer, a ruler whose iron discipline, tactical genius, and relentless determination pushed the empire to its medieval zenith. His reign is long, hard, and uncompromising. You follow him through decades of campaigns as he breaks the power of the Bulgarian Empire after a generation of bitter conflict. When victory finally comes, Byzantium expands northward, reclaiming vast lands and securing dominance over the Balkans. It is an achievement unlike anything the empire has known in centuries. For a moment, it seems as if Byzantium might reclaim the old dream of a Mediterranean world united under the double-headed eagle. Yet beneath this triumph, subtle fractures begin to form. Basil II's unyielding rule keeps the aristocracy in check, but after his death, the powerful landowning families he once held at bay rise swiftly. Successor emperors lack his discipline. The treasury, swollen by decades of conquest, is squandered. Imperial authority weakens. And in the east, an ominous new presence grows. The Seljuk Turks, skilled horsemen from Central Asia, fierce in battle, and united under leaders who recognize their rising power. The Byzantines, blind to the shifting geopolitical winds, make decisions that will prove catastrophic. Rival generals bicker for power. Court intrigue overshadows military readiness. By the time the empire realizes the threat posed by the Seljuks, it is already too late. The stage is set for Manzikert. But before tragedy strikes, you witness the cultural and spiritual brilliance of Byzantium at its height. The empire becomes the center of Orthodox Christianity, shaping liturgy, theology, and religious art across Eastern Europe. Missionaries Cyril and Methodius continue to influence Slavic lands long after their deaths, their alphabet, the Cyrillic script, becoming the foundation of Slavic literacy. In Bulgaria, Serbia, and Kievan Rus, churches rise in Byzantine style, their domes glowing like lanterns against winter skies. Back in Constantinople, the imperial court dazzles foreign visitors with ceremonies unmatched anywhere in the medieval world. The Book of Ceremonies, compiled under the Macedonian emperors, describes rituals so intricate and symbolically rich that even seasoned diplomats struggle to grasp them fully. Mechanical birds sing in golden branches. Thrones rise mechanically as envoys approach, elevating the emperor in a display of divine authority. Every gesture, every embroidered robe, every candlelit procession reinforces a single message. Byzantium is not merely a state, it is a cosmic order. But this grandeur masks vulnerability. As the 11th century progresses, the balance between military power and aristocratic privilege collapses. Wealthy families seize land that once belonged to small farmer soldiers, eroding the empire's military foundations. Tax revenues fall. Loyalty fractures. And while the court debates and plots, the Seljuk Turks move deeper into Anatolia like a tide that no wall can stop. Now, you arrive at the turning point, a moment that will decide the empire's fate for centuries. The year is 1071. Romanos IV Diogenes marches east with a large but disunified army, a force riddled with factions and rival loyalties. On the plains of Manzikert, surrounded by mountains and wide skies, the Byzantine army meets the Seljuks commanded by Alp Arslan. What follows is one of the most disastrous battles in Byzantine history. Betrayed by his own generals, Romanos is captured. The Byzantine lines collapse. What should have been a temporary setback becomes a catastrophe. Anatolia, the empire's heartland, its source of soldiers, grain, and wealth, begins slipping away almost immediately. The shock is unimaginable. Constantinople reels. Provinces fall into chaos. Turkish warlords establish power bases across the peninsula. Within a generation, most of Anatolia is lost, and with it, the empire's very future dims. And yet, Byzantium does not die. Even in its darkest moments, the empire reveals a resilience that defies expectation. The Comnenian emperors will soon rise to restore order through brilliance, diplomacy, and determination. The Crusades will reshape the empire's fate in ways no one could predict. Triumphs and disasters lie ahead, some glorious, some devastating, all shaping the Byzantine world that will eventually face the final siege of 1453. But for now, shattered by Manzikert yet unbroken in spirit, the empire stands at a crossroads, battered, diminished, but still alive, preparing to summon its strength once more. And yet, even as the empire basked in its moment of triumph, the foundations beneath it were already beginning to shift. Because history, especially Byzantine history, rarely allows long moments of peace. And the next chapter would plunge the empire into one of the most transformative, brilliant, and ultimately tragic eras it would ever face. You stand now at the dawn of the Comnenian era, the late 11th and 12th centuries, a period when the empire, battered and nearly broken, would rise once again through strategic brilliance, political resilience, and sheer will. The Byzantine Empire, despite losing great territories to the Seljuk Turks after the disaster at Manzikert, refused to fade quietly. In Constantinople, a new dynasty took the throne, a dynasty that understood both the fragility and the potential of what remained. And at its center stood a man who would become one of the greatest reformers in the empire's long history, Alexios I Komnenos. Alexios inherited not an empire, but a crisis. The treasury was empty. The aristocracy was restless. Foreign enemies pressed in from all sides: Normans from the west, Pecheneg from the north, Turks from the east. Constantinople itself lived in a state of constant fear. But Alexios possessed something rare among rulers of the age, a strategic mind that could see opportunities amid catastrophe. He reorganized the military, reshaped political alliances, and revived the economy by rebuilding trust with powerful clans. He forged a new version of Byzantine governance built on family loyalty, military service, and dynamic diplomacy. Yet no reform could hide the fundamental danger threatening the empire. The Seljuks had carved out a new Turkish heartland inside the very bones of Anatolia, the empire's ancient recruiting ground, its food supply, its core. Without Anatolia, Byzantium was a body without its heart. Alexios needed help. And so, in a decision that would change world history, he sent envoys to the Latin West, asking the Pope for mercenaries, not armies of Christendom, not holy war, only hired soldiers to help recover lost lands. But what arrived was something else entirely. In 1096, tens of thousands of men, women, and children surged toward Constantinople under the banner of the First Crusade. Fueled by religious fervor, political ambition, economic desperation, and a promise of salvation, they gathered at the gates of the Queen of Cities. Byzantium suddenly found itself host to an unpredictable tidal wave of Latin warriors, many of whom viewed the Greeks with suspicion and contempt. Alexios, pragmatic as ever, welcomed their leaders with strategic courtesy. He asked each crusader prince, Bohemond, Raymond, Godfrey, to swear an oath returning any reconquered Byzantine land to imperial control. Some swore reluctantly. Others swore with fingers metaphorically crossed. Still others had no intention of honoring any agreement at all. And then the Crusaders marched east. What followed reshaped the Mediterranean. While Crusader armies captured Nicaea, Antioch, Jerusalem, and swathes of the Levant, Alexios swiftly retook parts of western Anatolia. For a brief moment, the empire breathed again. The Komnenian revival had begun, but the Crusades opened a door that Byzantium would never again close. Latin armies, Latin merchants, Latin ambitions, all began to flow through the empire like a river that refused to reverse course. The seeds of future conflict had been planted. When Alexios died, his son John II Komnenos ascended the throne, a ruler often overshadowed by the brilliance of his father and the glamour of his son. Yet John might have been the most capable of them all. Modest, deeply religious, tireless in military campaigns, he governed with discipline and strategy. Under John, the empire strengthened its defenses, improved tax systems, and pushed deep into Anatolia and the Balkans. His reign was one of quiet competence, a rarity in medieval politics. But fate dealt him an untimely blow. In 1143, during a hunting expedition, he accidentally wounded himself with a poisoned arrow. Within days, the second Komnenian emperor was dead. His successor, however, would become a legend, a ruler both iconic and divisive, brilliant yet flawed, the last great emperor of Byzantium, Manuel I Komnenos. Manuel was a man of boundless ambition. He dreamed not simply of restoring the empire, but of dominating the Mediterranean. He forged alliances with the papacy, befriended Western kings, dazzled envoys with Byzantine luxury, and led campaigns stretching from Egypt to Hungary. Under Manuel, Constantinople became the glittering diplomatic stage of the world, a place where emperors, knights, scholars, and merchants all sought influence. He rebuilt the navy. He reformed the army. He patronized art and philosophy. And he believed, deeply and sincerely, that Byzantium could stand as the supreme power of Christendom. But ambition is a double-edged sword. Manuel trusted Latin allies too much. He spent vast sums on spectacular campaigns. He underestimated the Turks of Anatolia, whose power grew steadily. And in 1176, at the Battle of Myriokephalon, the empire suffered a crushing defeat that echoed massacred a century earlier. Though not as catastrophic, it shattered the dream of fully reclaiming the Anatolian plateau. Manuel died a few years later, leaving behind a weakened empire, a child emperor, and a political order that depended entirely on the strength of Comnenian leadership. Without a strong Comnenos on the throne, the carefully balanced system unraveled quickly. As the 12th century drew to a close, Byzantium found itself once again drifting toward crisis. Rival factions clawed for power. The aristocracy fractured. The empire's enemies, Seljuks, Serbs, Normans, Venetians, all watched with hungry eyes. And far away in the west, a new movement stirred. One that would strike Byzantium with a force no army could stop. One that would emerge not from religious zeal, but from greed, revenge, and political manipulation. The Fourth Crusade. A crusade that would not march toward Jerusalem, but toward Constantinople itself. The storm that had been gathering on the horizon for decades was now preparing to break. And as the 13th century opened, the Byzantine Empire, once the majestic fulcrum of East and West, stood unaware that it was about to face the single most devastating blow in its entire 1,100-year history. You are standing on the deck of a Venetian warship in the year 1203, drifting slowly toward the walls of Constantinople. Ahead of you rises the greatest city in the Christian world, a fortress of marble and gold, defended by the impregnable Theodosian walls. For 9 centuries, countless armies had approached these battlements. Every one of them had turned back. But this time is different, because the soldiers beside you are not Muslims, nor Slavs, nor Persians. They are crusaders, knights sworn to protect Christendom. And the rulers of Venice have pointed them not toward Jerusalem, but toward the heart of the Byzantine Empire. How did this happen? The answer lies in the mix of ambition, desperation, and deadly diplomacy that pulled Byzantium into the orbit of the Fourth Crusade, a campaign intended to reclaim the Holy Land, but instead hijacked by politics, financial debt, and Venetian hunger for power. When the Crusaders gathered in Venice, ready to sail east, they realized something catastrophic. They could not afford the fleet they had promised to rent. Venice, the ruthless maritime republic, seized its opportunity. Its leader, Doge Enrico Dandolo, an old man in his 90s and nearly blind, offered a deal. Venice would forgive the Crusaders' debt if they helped the Republic seize rival ports. But even that was not enough. Enter Alexios Angelos, a young Byzantine prince who had fled Constantinople after his father was deposed. He promised the Crusaders unimaginable riches, military support, and church submission if they helped him reclaim the throne. It was a bargain forged in desperation and destined to destroy an empire. In 1203, the Crusader fleet arrived at Constantinople. The Byzantines, fractured and leaderless, were stunned. After a brief siege, Alexios Angelos was installed as Emperor Alexios IV. But he could not deliver his promises. He couldn't pay the Crusaders' enormous demands. He couldn't force the Orthodox clergy to submit to Rome. And he couldn't rally a population that despised him as a Latin puppet. Tension exploded into riots. Fires ravaged districts. Factions battled in the streets. Finally, a palace coup toppled Alexios IV. The new emperor, Alexios V. Doukas, refused to honor the Crusaders' deals. He fortified the walls and prepared for war. The Crusaders, now enraged, unpaid, and manipulated for months, made a fatal decision. They would take Constantinople by force. On April 1204, the unimaginable happened. Latin soldiers stormed the walls. Venetian ships anchored alongside towers, allowing knights to jump directly onto the battlements. After hours of brutal combat, the great Byzantine capital fell, not to foreign invaders, but to fellow Christians. What followed was 3 days of horror, looting, burning, desecration. Churches were stripped of relics. Icons were smashed. Priceless manuscripts vanished. Nobles fled in panic. And the treasures of 1,000 years flowed westward to Venice and Europe. The Byzantine Empire, the empire of Constantine, Justinian, Basil II, was shattered. From its ruins emerged a new entity, the Latin Empire of Constantinople, a fragile state ruled by Crusader barons. Byzantium survived only in exile, divided into three Greek successor states: Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus. For 57 years, the Queen of Cities remained under Latin control. But the flame of Byzantium had not yet gone out. In the western Anatolian city of Nicaea, a new dynasty rose to reclaim the old empire. The emperors of Nicaea, especially John III Vatatzes, rebuilt administration, strengthened the economy, and preserved orthodox traditions. They gathered scholars, protected refugees, and created a government that was, in many ways, more stable than late Comnenian Constantinople. Across these years, one dream dominated every emperor's agenda: recover the city. That moment finally arrived in 1261 under Emperor Michael VIII Palaiologos. While the Latin garrison was absent on campaign, Byzantine forces under General Alexios Strategopoulos slipped through the city's defenses, seized key gates, and took Constantinople almost without bloodshed. After more than half a century in exile, the Byzantine Empire returned home. But what they inherited was a ghost of the past, a city half abandoned, walls in disrepair, palaces ruined, economy shattered. Michael VIII worked tirelessly to restore Constantinople. He rebuilt markets, repaired defenses, revived religious life, and re-established Byzantine prestige. Yet his policies brought new enemies, especially in the Balkans, and the empire, already weakened, struggled to hold its territory. The restored Byzantium was no longer the mighty power of old. It was an empire fighting to survive in a world that had moved on. Beyond its borders, new powers were rising: Serbian kings, Bulgarian tsars, Italian merchant republics, and above all, a small but growing Turkish principality across the Sea of Marmara. A principality that would soon become the most formidable empire the region had ever seen: the Ottomans. And they were coming. In the late 13th century, as the Palaiologan emperors struggled to rebuild a shattered capital, the world around them was beginning to transform. The map of Anatolia, once the beating heart of Byzantium, had fragmented into a constellation of Turkish beyliks. Among them was a small, obscure frontier state ruled by a chieftain named Osman. Few in Constantinople paid attention to him. Fewer still imagined that his people, the Ottomans, would one day erase the empire of Constantine itself. Yet this is where Byzantium's final chapter begins, not with a great army or a powerful king, but with a small frontier clan that understood the flow of history better than anyone else. As the 14th century dawned, the Byzantine Empire stood at its most fragile state in centuries. The state's resources were drained. Its armies were depleted. Its tax revenues had collapsed. Entire provinces had vanished into Latin, Serbian, or Turkish hands. The emperors, forced to play a delicate game of diplomacy, found themselves navigating a political world exploding with new threats. In the Balkans, the Serbian Empire under Stefan Dusan expanded rapidly, conquering towns that Byzantium could no longer defend. The once powerful Bulgarian Empire surged again, seeking to dominate the region. And in the west, Venetian and Genoese merchants fought over trade dominance inside the empire itself, turning Byzantine ports into battlegrounds for foreign profit. But the gravest threat came from the east, silent, methodical, unstoppable: the Ottomans. The rise of the Ottoman state mirrors the decline of Byzantium with eerie precision. Osman's warriors were hardened frontier fighters, skilled in guerrilla warfare and fueled by the promise of land and plunder. They attracted migrants, adventurers, and religious warriors eager for opportunity. Their strength was mobility. Their strategy was patience. While Byzantium was consumed by internal rivalries and civil wars, the Ottomans expanded step by step through the old Byzantine countryside, Bithynia first, then along the valleys, then to the coastline. They seized key towns like Bursa, which became their first capital. And with each conquest, more Christian subjects were incorporated into their administration, often treated more leniently than under Byzantine tax collectors. As the people of Anatolia shifted their loyalty, the empire's territorial collapse accelerated. But Byzantium's leaders were not finished fighting, though, tragically, they often fought each other more fiercely than their enemies. In the mid-14th century, a devastating civil war broke out between John V Palaiologos and John VI Kanakazinos. It was a conflict that shattered an empire already dying. Both claimants invited foreign armies into Byzantine cities: Serbs, Bulgarians, Venetians, and, fatefully, the Ottomans. Ottoman warriors crossed the Dardanelles not as conquerors, but as invited allies, hired to fight a Byzantine civil dispute. When their task was finished, they stayed. In 1354, an earthquake damaged the fortress of Gallipoli, and the Ottomans moved in, settling families and planting the seeds of a permanent European foothold. Byzantium had opened the gates of Europe to an empire far more dynamic than its own. The consequences were irreversible. As Ottoman power surged, key Byzantine cities fell one by one. The countryside around Constantinople became Ottoman territory. Byzantine emperors were reduced to paying tribute, asking for Ottoman military permission, and negotiating marriages into the Ottoman royal family. Constantinople, the city once called the Queen of Cities, had become an island surrounded by another empire. Still, the Byzantines resisted. Emperor Manuel II Palaiologos traveled across Europe, pleading for Western aid. He visited courts from Paris to London, speaking eloquently of the danger that threatened all of Christendom. But the West was fractured, distracted by its own wars. Help never came in time. Inside the empire, famine, population decline, and economic collapse hollowed out a society that had once dazzled the medieval world with its wealth and sophistication. And yet, even in its twilight, Byzantium produced some of its most brilliant cultural achievements: philosophers, scholars, musicians, and theologians who kept ancient knowledge alive. In palaces that were falling into ruin, debates about Plato and Aristotle continued. Illuminated manuscripts were copied. The Orthodox liturgy echoed in half-empty churches. A fading light, but a light still burning. By the early 15th century, one final emperor would rise, a man remembered for his courage, resolve, and unyielding loyalty to a doomed legacy. Constantine XI Palaiologos. He would reign not as a builder of empire, but as its last guardian, the final defender of 1,000 years of history. The fate of the Byzantine world now depended on him, and on the army gathering across the Bosphorus, preparing for the most consequential siege in medieval history. You stand on the walls of Constantinople, the year 1453, the air thick with anticipation, smoke, and the scent of the sea. Below, the Ottoman army, commanded by Sultan Mehmed II, assembles, tens of thousands of men, tens of thousands of cannons, and a determination that rivals the city's 1,000-year-old spirit. Across the Golden Horn, massive chains block the harbor. On the walls, barely 7,000 defenders, soldiers, monks, and citizens alike, prepare for what will be the final chapter of Byzantine resistance. Among them is Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor, a man who embodies the courage, dignity, and tragedy of Byzantium itself. For centuries, the empire has endured invasions, civil wars, plagues, and crusades. Yet nothing in its long history matches the scale and inevitability of this siege. Mehmed's vision is not simply conquest, it is destiny. He has assembled Europe's finest engineers to design massive cannons, including the legendary basilica, capable of smashing the city's ancient walls. He understands the psychology of siege warfare, employing tunnels, artillery bombardments, and relentless pressure to break the defenders' morale. And above all, he believes in himself, a young sultan of 21 determined to etch his name into history. For the Byzantines, survival is both tactical and spiritual. Within the walls, priests bless the soldiers. Women and children haul stones, fill sandbags, and prepare boiling oil to pour on attackers. Every citizen becomes a part of the city's defense. And above all, the knowledge of the city's legacy, a millennium of Roman civilization preserved in stone, law, and faith, fuels their determination. Constantinople is more than a city. It is the symbol of an unbroken civilization. The siege begins on April 6, 1453. Cannons roar, shaking towers and rattling centuries-old walls. The defenders fire arrows, hurl Greek fire, and launch counterattacks. But the Ottomans' overwhelming numbers and firepower slowly erode the fortifications. The city resists for 53 days, its walls scarred but still standing, its people steadfast. Each day is a struggle for survival, each night a prayer for deliverance. Every street, every tower, every gate becomes a microcosm of the empire's long fight for existence. Mehmed, relentless, orders massive assaults. Engineers dig beneath the walls, attempting to collapse them from below. Ships slip past the harbor chains at night. The defenders respond with courage and ingenuity, but the odds are insurmountable. Constant bombardment weakens the ancient Theodosian walls, once thought invincible, and morale begins to falter. It is a siege unlike any other, where the weight of history bears down on those fighting atop the walls. On May 29th, the inevitable occurs. After a final, massive assault, the Ottomans break through a weakened section of the walls at the gate of St. Romanus. The defenders fight valiantly, but chaos engulfs the city. Constantine XI, refusing to flee, rallies his troops and charges into battle. He disappears amidst the fighting, his death becoming legend, the last Roman emperor falling as the empire he inherited for over a millennium finally meets its end. The city is looted, churches desecrated, treasures carried away. Constantinople, the jewel of the medieval world, falls. Mehmed II rides through the streets, proclaiming the birth of a new empire, the Ottoman Empire. Yet in the destruction, something remarkable survives: the culture, knowledge, and legacy of Byzantium, carried by fleeing scholars, artists, and priests to Italy, the Balkans, and beyond. These refugees ignite the Renaissance, preserving classical texts and transmitting Byzantine thought into the heart of Western Europe. Though the empire has ended politically, its influence persists. Byzantine law shapes the Ottoman administration. Orthodox Christianity survives in the Eastern Mediterranean. Byzantine art, architecture, and philosophy ripple across centuries. And the memory of Constantinople, its walls, its domes, its mosaics, and its emperors, continues to inspire awe and scholarship long after the final cannon has fired. Constantinople's fall is not just a military event. It is the symbolic end of an era, the last vestige of the Roman world vanishing into history. Yet the story of Byzantium is not one of simple defeat. It is a story of endurance, resilience, brilliance, and transformation. For more than 1,100 years, Byzantium stood at the crossroads of civilizations, preserved knowledge that would shape the future, and left a legacy that no empire could erase. And as the sun sets over the Golden Horn, the city that refused to die quietly whispers its memory to the world, a story of courage, intellect, and a civilization that will live forever in history. As the smoke clears and Constantinople lies in the hands of the Ottomans, you feel the weight of a civilization that has shaped the course of history. Byzantium may have fallen, but its legacy is everywhere, in law, in religion, in art, in philosophy, in the very idea of empire itself. To understand the full impact of Byzantium, we must look beyond walls and wars, into the enduring imprint left on the world. Byzantine law, codified under emperors such as Justinian centuries before the empire's fall, becomes a foundation for legal systems across Europe. The Corpus Juris Civilis, preserved through the centuries, informs the development of civil law in Italy, France, and beyond. Even in the Ottoman Empire, Justinian's principles survive in adapted form, influencing administrative systems and governance. The meticulous bureaucracy of Byzantium, perfected over a millennium, teaches later empires how to organize complex, multi-ethnic states. Religion and culture also carry the Byzantine torch far beyond the empire's borders. The Orthodox Church thrives in Russia, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece, preserving liturgical practices, theological scholarship, and the iconographic traditions developed in Constantinople. Missionaries such as Cyril and Methodius had already spread Byzantine religious and cultural influence into the Slavic world centuries earlier, but after 1453, the diaspora of scholars and clergy ensures that Byzantium continues to shape Eastern Christendom long after its political power vanishes. Art and architecture, too, remain vibrant testimonies to Byzantine ingenuity. The iconic domes and mosaics of Hagia Sophia inspire Renaissance architects and later Ottoman builders alike. Byzantine manuscript illumination preserves classical knowledge and inspires Western humanists. Its aesthetic, a fusion of classical harmony and spiritual transcendence, becomes a bridge between ancient and medieval, Eastern and Western, mortal and divine. Even in the realm of military strategy and diplomacy, the lessons of Byzantium endure. The empire's use of diplomacy, intelligence, and strategic marriages becomes a model studied by rulers across Europe and Asia. The careful balancing of multiple enemies and allies, a hallmark of Byzantine statecraft, remains a case study in political survival. For centuries, scholars marvel at the empire's capacity to endure for over a millennium despite constant threats. And yet, the most profound aspect of Byzantine legacy is perhaps its resilience of spirit. For over 1,100 years, the empire survived invasions, plagues, civil wars, schisms, and internal decay. Its citizens, administrators, soldiers, and clergy continually adapted to changing circumstances, preserving knowledge, faith, and identity across centuries of uncertainty. This resilience shapes not only the lands of the Eastern Mediterranean, but the very consciousness of Europe and the Near East. Byzantium teaches that even in decline, a civilization can radiate influence, inspiring future generations long after its political structures have vanished. In modern times, the fascination with Byzantium endures. Historians study its archives. Artists replicate its mosaics. Scholars debate its theology. Tourists marvel at its surviving monuments. And in every corner of the world touched by its influence, from Orthodox churches in Russia to Renaissance libraries in Florence, Byzantium lives on, a civilization whose story continues to captivate, instruct, and inspire. The Byzantine Empire, from its origins as the eastern half of Rome to its death beneath the cannons of Mehmed II, was a world unlike any other, complex, brilliant, resilient, and eternal in its influence. Its emperors dreamed of eternal rule. Its scholars preserved the wisdom of antiquity. Its artists created beauty that transcended time. And though Constantinople fell, the empire's ideas, culture, and spiritual vision refused to vanish. In the end, Byzantium reminds us that civilizations are measured not only by their walls or armies, but by the legacy they leave in the minds, hearts, and souls of those who come after. Its story is a testament to endurance, creativity, and the profound capacity of human society to adapt, survive, and inspire. A story that began over a millennium ago and continues to echo through history today. And so, we arrive at the final reflection, the epilogue of a story spanning over 1,100 years, a tale of ambition, brilliance, faith, and resilience. The Byzantine Empire, though it fell in 1453, is not merely a story of decline and conquest. It is the story of a civilization that bridged the ancient and the modern, the East and the West, the mortal and the divine. As you stand atop the reconstructed walls of Constantinople in your imagination, the city stretches out before you. Golden domes glint in the sun. Markets bustle with merchants from every corner of the known world. Scholars debate philosophy in marble halls. Soldiers patrol streets built by centuries of law, strategy, and ingenuity. For more than a millennium, this city, this empire, was the heartbeat of a civilization that shaped continents. You see the emperors who dreamed of unbroken rule. Constantine the Great, founding a capital that would outlive the Roman West. Justinian I, whose ambition sought to reclaim the Roman world and codify its laws. Basil II, whose military genius earned the moniker Bulgar Slayer, and Constantine XI Palaiologos, who died defending the empire's final bastion. Each emperor, in their triumphs and failures, represents the enduring spirit of Byzantium, a civilization that knew both glory and tragedy. You witness the scholars who preserved the wisdom of Greece and Rome. You see the artists and architects whose mosaics, frescoes, and domes continue to inspire awe centuries later. You hear the liturgy of the Orthodox Church echoing across lands far beyond the empire's final borders. And in every corner, you feel the subtle threads of influence that Byzantium wove into the fabric of Europe, Russia, and the Near East, threads that still guide law, art, and faith to this day. And yet, the empire's story is more than achievements. It is a testament to resilience. For every sack, every defeat, every loss of territory, Byzantium endured. It adapted. It evolved. It survived in exile, in manuscripts, in architectural inspiration, and in the hearts of people who carried its memory across oceans and centuries. Its fall was not the erasure of a civilization, but the transformation of its influence into new forms. The Renaissance, the Orthodox world, and the administrative genius of future empires all bear its mark. The Byzantine Empire teaches us that history is not a simple narrative of rise and fall. It is the interplay of vision and circumstance, creativity and survival, faith and pragmatism. It is the story of a civilization that endured for over a millennium, leaving behind treasures of culture, law, art, and spirituality that continue to shape our world. As the camera pans over the Golden Horn, past Hagia Sophia's domes, across the remnants of city walls, you feel the pulse of a civilization that, though conquered, is immortal in its influence. The Byzantine Empire was more than a state. It was a civilization that defined an era, preserved the wisdom of the past, and illuminated the future. From the founding of Constantinople in 330 CE to the fall of its walls in 1453, the empire stood as a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and ambition. Its story is a bridge between worlds, a chronicle of triumphs and tragedies, a reminder that civilizations may fall, but their spirit endures. And as the sun sets over the Bosporus, the light glints off mosaics, domes, and the waves, a final, silent testament. Byzantium may have fallen, but it will never be forgotten.